You better not just learn this thing. You better master this thing. Every angle. That comes from obsessive work and obsessive effort. That's what you have to do to truly dominate an industry.
Welcome to the Masters of Business podcast with Daniel Beer.
Anthony Lamacchia, straight out of Boston, Massachusetts here, and just taking over all of New England, it seems like. Heck, there's even word you're starting to kill it down in South Florida. So welcome to the podcast, man. This is Masters of Business, and I'm just going to set the table because, as you know, on this podcast, we jump right into it. We don't spend a whole lot of time on the backstory, but this guy's doing, he's on pace for about $75 million in revenue this year. And check this out. His biggest business, of course, is brokerage business, but significant revenues in property management and landscape and training. And this is and I love something you said as we were in the green room here a moment ago, Anthony. You said, business, it's kind of like professional athletes. When you're good at business, professional athletes tend to be good at a lot of different sports, but they are just masters of one typically. And I love that because that's what we look for right here. We're across all different industries and we find these common threads and learning points from people in, cross industry that we can use. And that just like, there's this common language of business. There's those things that you can use no matter what industry you're in. So anyway, man, welcome. Just prop you up as having accomplished so much. And by the way, this is a guy that I've long looked up to, long stalked online, long, called for advice. So pay attention if you're listening. But Anthony, with all that being said and done, we all know you've accomplished so much. What are some of the biggest challenges you face? Because sometimes that's where the biggest lessons lay, right? Some of the biggest challenges you face in scaling to where you're at now, which in your industry is upper echelon.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for having me, and right back at you with all those comments. I mean, I've been watching you, and we've been cheering each other on for years, and I'm happy to be here and happy to be a part of this. But I mean, listen, there's no lack of challenges when you're in business, and I would tell you, there's been tons of challenges along the way. In the last 2 years, I'd say the biggest challenge that I've had is, we are executing my plan and my dream for the 5 years before, which is when the market gets bad, we're going to acquire other companies and we're going to do it at scale. And we're doing that. But it's like a job in itself, right? And I'm a guy that already works 80 hours a week. Well, when you start acquiring companies and bringing on other companies, onboarding them, getting them acclimate with the culture, there's a lot that goes along with that, and training our people in doing that and getting our staff and even our management, even our leaders to understand that, hey, when you acquire a company, really the only person that did the research on you, regardless of business, think of it this way, regardless of what business line, when you acquire a company, the only person or people that did the research on you and made the active decision to join you is the people at the very top. Everybody else, they went to work one day and found out, hey, we're owned by Lamacchia now, right? That is an awkward thing to explain when you are the person doing the acquisition, because those people didn't make the decision. The decision was made for them. And they take that oftentimes as, who moved my cheese? Who moved my cheese? I didn't decide to go to Lamacchia. They had me decide to do that. So, I'm learning a lot of different lessons, some of them painfully, with doing this at scale. We did 2 acquisitions in 2020, one in 2015, one in 2018. Then we've done 7 in the last 14 months. Okay. There is a lot of nuts and bolts and pieces that go into that. And I'll tell you, I'm taking tremendous mental notes because my brother's the president of our family's landscaping business that I'm the shareholder in. And I tell him, hey, eventually we're going to be acquiring many other landscaping companies. A lot of the challenges that I'm learning here in the brokerage space, we're going to need to do in the landscaping space, right? There's different things that you're going to have to deal with. So I would just say the biggest challenge is acclimating to the new ways of growing the company. Because when you're running a business, I don't care what the business is, every 3, 4, 5 years, you have to somewhat reinvent, redo a lot of processes, and then it gets gliding again. And I would say I'm going through that adjustment period now. I think I'm in the 3rd quarter of it, and we're about to set the course. let it glide for a few years, and then in a few years, there'll be some other change we'll have to make. That's not easy. Change is not easy.
So I love doing this podcast, man, because I just get to ask the questions I want to ask, the things I want to learn about. And hopefully the audience is on board, but, typically, but from what they're telling us, they are. So when it comes to an acquisition, and it's tied really to one of the questions that I love asking all of our guests, Anthony. One of the questions I always ask our guests is, how do you know if you're looking at an opportunity worth pursuing versus a distraction, a squirrel, the proverbial shiny object? Now, I'm typically asking that not in the context of an acquisition. With you, I want to look at it in terms of a merger and acquisition. How do you know? Because I mean, this is not a discussion we've had, but I want to imagine, you correct me if I'm wrong, that there are opportunities you look at and you might even say, that's a great company. There's a lot to like about them. They're right for somebody, not for us. Versus others that maybe I'd look at and say, hey, I don't quite see it, but you see. So how this idea of the true opportunity versus a distraction, but in the context of an acquisition, what's your framework for assessing it?
So that's something.
People there's people in the SaaS business, software business. There's dentists listening to this who are always acquiring different practices. What are the lessons that you can leave us with?
So great question, and it shows how good of a thinker you are. Our buy box a year and a half ago was this big, and for those listening, I'm putting my hands wide, right? Over the last year and a half, our buy box is getting smaller, and we've identified the area that we always nail it with acquisitions. And I don't even mind sharing parts of what that is, right? We have found that when we buy companies that have been in business 30 plus years, where they have realtors that have been with them 10, 20 plus years, male owners with the wife involved, very successful, often very successful acquisitions for us, okay? They tend to be older school. They tend to value the traditional brokerage. The agents value the traditional brokerage model with the assistants and having the tools and the things they need. And the company that we are acquiring in the last 10 years probably got away from supplying those different tools and different things that agents like, but they're the type of things that those agents like. So when they come to us, they think it's Christmas morning, right? Some companies provide less. Doesn't mean they're not a good company, but if they're an agent, if they're a company full of agents who just value the highest split possible, they don't need very many things because they want to develop them themselves. They're not as into our company. And I know, let them go somewhere else. Okay, I had a lunch with someone in Fort Lauderdale a couple months ago. By the end of the lunch, I looked at the guy and I said, you're not a fit for our company. You're running a good company. But for our company, your agents aren't going to appreciate us as much. So I recommend you go to this company. And I recommended a certain company, right? And I wouldn't have done that a year ago. I would have tried to fit a circle into a square hole a little bit more. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't reckless, but I've really identified the buy box more. I do that in every area I get involved in. When I got pulled back into my family's landscape construction business in 2020 because my dad was having some problems, they did a bunch of bigger jobs. And I talked to my brother and I said, Joe, where are we making the most money? He said, Anthony, the jobs that are $25,000 to $60,000, we're kicking ass on. Here's the numbers. He showed me right here at my desk. I said, okay, give me a list of the addresses of those jobs. I want a list. He goes, the addresses? Are you going to drive by them? I said, hell no, I'm never going to drive by them in my life, but I want the addresses. My brother sent me the addresses. I gave them to my assistant. I said, I want to know when they bought the homes, what they paid, because I wanted to find out what was unique about those $25,000 to $60,000 jobs. She comes back and she goes, Anthony, you know what I realized? They all bought within the last 6 years. They bought their home within the last 6 years. I said, okay. I went to my brother. I said, Joe, let me guess. They're all between 35 and 50 years old. He goes, how'd you know? I said, well, I knew because they all bought within the last 6 years. And people spend the most money in their life between 35 and 50 years old. And I said, those are the people we got to go after. So guess what we did? We bought lists of all the people that bought homes in the last 6 years, everywhere around the half an hour, and they all had to buy over $1 million. So it's over $1 million purchase last 6 years. So instead of sending postcards to the whole damn town, I said, Joe, And I told our marketing department, I said, let's send postcards, not one a month. Let's send 3 a month just to those houses because there's way fewer of them. Guess what? We did it. Phone went off the hook. My brother's swimming in jobs. Now he's getting jobs 75 to 150,000. They're doing them every day. Profit of the company goes through the roof. My brother goes, holy shit, I can't believe it. I said, yeah, because I identified what was unique about those people. So in every area that we get into over the last 20 years, 25 years, I always look for what are the unique characteristics of that buyer, of that consumer. In the brokerage space, while I'm doing acquisitions, I have identified that it's male owners, wives involved, male owners 50 to 70 years old, right? Companies that are doing at least $50 million a year in sales volume and up. Those ones do good. In the landscape space, I just explained the criteria. Now, organic recruiting in the brokerage space. I realized in 2018, I said, we're having a much harder time every damn time we're trying to close a recruit that is a male, 35 to 50 years old. They're a pain in my ass. And they want this and they want that and they have an attitude. And when I call them, they're not wooed. I call to try to get them over the finish line. I try to close them. They're not wooed. But when I call the females, they're wooed. They're impressed. I said, I know what it is. The males are more proud. Males make more decisions based on pride than logic. I told the team, forget going after the males 35 to 50, go after the females and then everybody else in the ages in between. Guess what happened? Our recruiting went up. We improved. So every area I get involved in, I always want to find the buy box. We're flipping homes. We've flipped over 80 homes from 2018 to 2022, over 80. And I realized every time we flipped a home that we bought between 300 and 500,000, and we did minimal work on it, we made money, everybody was happy. The handful of times that we lost money, it was when we had to pull numerous permits, etc. So the point I'm getting at is the challenge is identifying the box to be in. And that's what everybody tries to serve everyone. You can't be a master to everyone. You got to find the buy box according to the market you're in. And when you find it, you got to hit the effing gas hard. And you stay in that buy box until you realize, shit, the market's changed. Then you find a new buy box.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes such good sense. That's awesome. That is just awesome. And just so many nuggets that regardless of who you are, if you're in business, you can use. Just a simple realization think about either your life or someone you know, a family member, depending on your age. The simple fact that 35 to 50 years old is when you're going to spend the most money. Makes perfect sense. Before 35, you don't have that much money. After 50, you're starting to think, okay, I need to be able to conserve for my later years. And so that's going to be when you do your big landscape projects. That's going to be when you buy your biggest home. That's going to be when if you're looking for somebody to acquire your dentist practice or your dentistry practice, it's probably going to be the dude. He's probably just come out of the apprenticeship, wherever he's at. Now he's ready to buy his own practice. So really, really good. Really good. Now, in that realm, let's talk about risk tolerance and risk assessment. So how do you approach the topic? How do you approach risk taking? And your personal tolerance, where would you rate yourself compared to other entrepreneurs that you know, and whether it be your industry, other industries?
Well, I think my risk tolerance is pretty high and sometimes too high. I think that I'm a little too willing to take risks sometimes. I think I've improved in the last few years. But when things are booming and, our bottom line was quite high years back, I was more willing to get involved in this, get involved in that. You got to be careful. Now, my risk tolerance isn't Elon Musk level, but it's high, right? It's high. And I think that maybe I have a little bit of an addiction to risk. And here's the problem. If you're not willing to take risks, you will never, ever be a successful entrepreneur. If you always stay in the safe zone, you will not grow the company. So you've got to balance that behavior. And I would say that there's been times in my career that I've been I've taken on too much risk. I've always worked it out and been fine, but it's cost me some money along the way. One thing I'm not, Dan, and you know this, I'm not scared. I'll try anything. I'll throw money out and say, hey, let's do it. To me, people hold on to money like it's blood, and they're going to die if they lose 10 grand, or they're going to die if they lose. when I go to Vegas, I've seen you in Vegas how many times? You'll never catch me gambling. You'll never catch me behind a slot machine because I gamble with real money in business every
Man,
day.
I tell you, it's so funny because I didn't know that about you. And granted, I have seen you in Vegas a bunch of times. I don't have any memories of you at the table, but I've never processed that.
Never.
But I've told people for years, because I'll go to Vegas, man, I'll watch people that frankly just make a lot less money than I do, and they're throwing thousands. It's just wild. And then, you know, I'll tell them, like, man, I don't know how you do it. Because don't get me wrong, I make 50 and 100 and six-figure, type of bets, $30,000 bets, $50,000 bets all day long in business, six-figure bets in business. But if I lose like $50 on a blackjack hand, it's winning the hand doesn't make me happy enough to even have the risk of losing the hand. It's so it's like
No.
it just
Well, and I think part of it's control. I'm comfortable taking the risk if it's on me if I lose. The first place I look, Dan, when we have any problem in any one of our business lines or businesses is me.
Yeah.
Right there, there's a mirror behind me, right? I always say, what could I do better? What could I have messaged better? I'll tell you, let me tell you one that I just occurred to me a month ago. I'm looking around, I said, Jesus, now that we grow, we got 20-something managers. I'm finding too often that this staff person over here at this branch office is slow, but then this person over here barely can go home at night because she's so busy. This person on this department is swamped. I finally talked to the management team and I said, guys, I'm going to hold all of you accountable if you've got people that are dead slow and then people that are swamped. I told them that a week and a half ago. Do you know any improvements I've seen in the last week and a half with people sharing work? Then yesterday morning, I got on a Facebook Live in a private group to our employees, and I said, hey, everybody, if you're feeling more pressure from management to find out how busy you are and help you distribute some of your work if you're overloaded to others and help you get busier if you're slow, that's coming straight from me. I said, be a good employee and raise your hand if you're slow. Say, hey, I can take on more. I did that yesterday morning. We've got 125 employees in all the companies. Do you know that 3 people reached out by noontime? Hey, I'd love to be busier. What else could I get involved in? A couple of managers, holy shit, I didn't realize they were slow. I said, you didn't realize because you didn't ask. So my point is, when you're on top, you've got to always be finding ways, finding opportunities to make things run more efficient, push your people to dig, push them to find trouble because there's always money being lost.
This is such a good topic because, one of the core business principles that I think anybody would just agree with, you have to inspect what you expect, these cliches, but they're true. Accountability, of course, we all agree with it. But how do you actually do it, Anthony, at scale? How many offices do you have? You have 125 employees you just mentioned. So how do you actually inspect what you expect at the scope and scale that you're at, especially once you've gotten to multiple locations, and push accountability down the line and do it without being some kind of monster dictator, micromanager? Like, that's a big question, but I'll leave you with it.
It's hard. We have 19 branch offices, and in the brokerage business, we have, 85, 90 employees, and that includes a bunch of people overseas. But it's hard. And one thing that I've learned, and I should have did it sooner, Dan, is share reporting. We used to hoard reports, keep performance indicators to those of us on top. We don't do that now. We share the reporting. And I tell people, if you see this, take that action. You see that, take this action. And I'll tell you, the more you grow and the more you share, the more the people learn what to look for too. Because I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not. And the people under me, there's plenty of people that are smarter, but you have to arm them with the information. And I do frankly wish that I shared more of the key performance indicators, the dashboards that I have on right here on my cell phone from our Salesforce. I wish I shared those more regularly before.
So that's really interesting. So you're teaching them how to digest the data, how to think. And I guess what I'm extrapolating from that is that fewer issues arise as a result.
Because here's what I used to do, Dan. There'd be 3 of us that would get reports. We get a weekly snapshot. I could tell you what we have in the bank, what our receivables are, how many current pendings we have. Every business line we're in, I get an email Monday night with an Excel sheet that gives me a snapshot of where we are at in that business, okay? Literally a snapshot. Money in the bank, debt, everything. I would hoard that and I'd go, what the hell's going on here? We got a problem. And then I'd run to that department. Blah, 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 blah. Then I said, why aren't I giving that a weekly report? Why aren't they creating their own weekly report?
Yeah.
And the more you do that, the more, you can't expect them to take action if they don't have the information at their fingertips. But once they do, now you can truly hold them accountable and say, hey, you're getting this report every week. Why is it taking me to see there's an issue there?
So what's the difference between you and who you are today versus, say, 5 to 10 years ago?
I'm working harder because of the situation. I'm probably, frankly, at the point of overworking in the next 2 years where it's getting like unhealthy. And I'm working to get that in check right now. We just had some meetings. We intentionally didn't acquire any companies in August or September. We're not, because we said we've got to get some things here working better. But I am working. I'm better about explaining the why. I'm better about not getting angry or flying off the handle than I was 10 years ago. I'm better about understanding that we're in the people business. And if people aren't feeling good, that'll create problems. So in some ways, I think I'm better. In some ways, I think I got to improve. Like, for example, overworking. I think I got to get that in check. And I'm in the process of getting that in check because you know this, Dan. You've done a phenomenal job. You have a massive group of people under you with EXP, and you do many other things, coaching and training. When you're growing a business, you grow, you hit a ceiling. Then you figure out how the hell to break through that ceiling, and then eventually you hit another ceiling. You have to, when you're breaking through those ceilings, you got to do it not just with working harder, but working smarter. And in the last 2 years, I've really pushed myself because, Dan, I look at this opportunity in the real estate business. I mean, we are in a housing recession, right? We are in, I don't care what anybody says, there's going to be less than 4 million homes sold in the United States this year. The average annually is 5.3, 5.4 million. We're going to be 3.8. This is the biggest housing recession in 30 years. I'm not missing this opportunity. I'm 43 years old, and I'm going to make sure that I sop up all the market share that I possibly can, because frankly, between the slowdown and the legal challenges, which are a scam, okay, these legal cases are a bunch of bullshit, and I've called all these lawyers out, but we're never going to have those two again. And even though those two are causing us all a lot of headaches, they're also bringing us the biggest opportunities that we're going to see in a career. And I'm not missing it. I'm not missing it.
Let's unpack this for anybody that's looking to gain market share and finding those windows in which you can find or gain disproportionate market share to virtually any other time. So just provide some context here, because you called it a housing recession. Having said that, listeners might be like, whoa, well, what's happening with my equity? I thought it was okay. Look, by the time you listen to this, you might be listening to this as it's recorded. You might be listening 3 years later. But as of the time of this recording, your equity's fine.
Correct.
But there is a transaction count recession, which is how a brokerage makes money. So there is a business recession. Correct, Anthony?
100% correct. And that's what's so unique from now till 2008. The last housing bust, inventory's through the roof, and inventory of homes for sales through the roof, prices are falling. We're not seeing that this time. We're just seeing a lack of transactions, similar to what happened in the early 1980s.
It sounds horrible. Why are you calling it an opportunity?
Because when there's pain, it makes people change behavior. And what's been interesting to me, Dan, I thought I would be buying more companies with financial trouble. It's not like that. It's more companies that the owners are like, hey, you know what? I don't want to deal with this slowdown. I'm having trouble getting my agents motivated. And all this new legal bullshit, that's what some of them say to me. I don't want to deal with it. Let Anthony deal with it. So we have the right people in place. We have a general counsel who ran a state association, knows the forms, knows the legalities, has that stuff down. So I'm looking at it saying, okay, we've got 675 agents today in September of 2024. 1 year from now, we're probably going to have 1,000, 1,200 agents. And that's because we're growing. I mean, year to date, Dan, last year we did $1.9 billion or 1.875 or something $billion in sales volume. We did hundreds of relocation referrals. We did 1,000 rentals, right? 1.9 billion. This year to date, we've already recruited $700 million worth of new sales volume. By the time I get to the end of the year, we're going to have recruited $1 billion in new sales volume. So this year, we're going to end up about 2.6 billion in sales volume. Next year, we're going to go 3.5 billion in sales volume during a down market when prices are depressed. Imagine when the sales come back, we're going to be 4 billion, 5 billion, and that doesn't even include the growth thereafter. So this is my time, and I'm not missing it.
So it's a classic Buffett, right? When there's fear in the streets, I don't know, I don't remember the rhyme, but get greedy, and when people are greedy, get scared. So you're getting greedy. Yeah. Yep. All right. So that makes a lot of sense. Why don't you, the vast majority of our listeners are homeowners. Just go ahead and unpack the legal landscape of what's happening in real estate, because they're all reading, it's wild, man. And I'll give you I'll give you my little intro to it. I know the industry as opposed to most other industries. I really know the industry of real estate. So I read the headlines on CNN, on Fox News, doesn't matter what publication, doesn't matter. I read the headlines and I'm like, wow, that is not even close to what's actually happening or the truth. And it is remarkably misleading. But that's only because I understand the industry. And then it makes me think, what do I not know about all the other headlines, about all the other things that I'm not an expert in? And how misled am I in every other area of life by them? So it's just interesting. But go ahead and unpack that, because one of the questions that I wanted to ask you anyhow is, what are you working on now? And aside from acquisition, you've been one of the champions of, I'm going to say, the entire realtor community, and by default, the buyer and seller community, the consumer, in what you've been alluding to as legal issues, or the legal landscape of real estate. But we don't need to get lost in this for, any in great depth. But let's get into it some. Because I'd like to tie it to activism and how entrepreneurs need to be thinking about that. Because if we do not get involved, then who's going to get involved on our behalf that's not even from our industry and make the rules for us? So why don't you take over there? Give us the snapshot. I think you're the most qualified to do it.
Well, it's a long, drawn-out legal complex issue. Bottom line, the way we go about getting paid is what's changed. These articles that say things like, the 6% commission is gone. I mean, Deborah Kamen, the biggest gaslighting national reporter there is at the New York Times, when she came up with that headline on the morning of March 15th, when the settlement happened, a lot of the other media companies across the country copied it, and it just confused the hell out of everybody, right? And, when people sell their homes, they want to sell for the most money. When people are buying a home, they want to buy for the best deal that they possibly can. So really, the way us realtors go about getting paid is what's changing. The how much, well, that comes down to the negotiation between the single realtor practitioner and their private company and the consumer. People, I know, Dan, we've all been getting pushback on commissions as long as we've both been doing this. But if you read some of the headlines, they act like we don't. We act like they act like commissions are fixed, and it's just insane. So it's an attack on our industry. I believe it originates from disruptors. And let's face it, every industry out there has people that want to try to disrupt and come up with a widget or a gadget or some technological thing that they can do business with. And I believe it's the disruptors that went out and got these attorneys and sicked them on our business. Unfortunately, they're going to walk away with nearly $1 billion by the time all this money's paid, $1 billion in settlement money. The homeowners that they claim were harmed, who were not harmed, are going to get $12, and their plaintiff attorneys are going to walk away with $400 million, $300 million between all of them. It's insane. It's a complete legal hoax. It's unfair what's happened. But I truly felt that the defendants in the case didn't fight as hard as they should. And I was getting very concerned about the way that it would end up and the harm that it would do to buyers and sellers, buyers in particular. And that's why I got so vocal coming up on a year ago, and I haven't stopped. And a lot of people have said, you're nuts. What are you doing? These people are going to sue you. My attitude is, go ahead, sue me. But I just know I won't be like the other defendants. I will be a tyrant. I will torment the plaintiffs. I will torment the plaintiffs' attorneys, because an attack on our industry is an attack on me. And an attack on me, if there becomes one, is an attack on our industry. And I know that the hardworking realtors across America do so much for buyers and sellers. We get so involved in their lives, and these people are out acting like we're ripping people off, and it pissed me off. And I happen to be someone that can talk on camera. And I knew that. And I knew that most people in our industry were muffled by the lawyers. I don't have a lawyer to answer to. I don't have a board of directors to answer to. I don't have shareholders to answer to. I got a few people that I started the company with that if I go too far off the rails, they'll tell me to cool it down and I'll maybe cool it down. But that's it. And that's why I've given it back to them and I've corrected the record on a lot of things. And one of the plaintiff's attorneys, the lead plaintiff attorney, took note of that. And that's why him and I debate things live on Housing Wire. And I wasn't there to make friends. And I owed it a lot of different things. And I think that I've had some positive impact, not as much as I set out to have. But bottom line, our industry, buyers and sellers are always going to be buying. They're always going to want to work with realtors. It's just the way it goes. And that's how I feel.
So what's the advice that you'd give anybody who's in business for them, running a business they own, a partnership, entrepreneurs, regardless of the industry, it's just this interesting catch-22 where we're some of the busiest people that we know. Meanwhile, the politicians, the council members, the assembly people in your local politics and your state politics, and then sometimes federally, are out there. They're not in business. They don't have the problems we have. They have none of the consequences of good policy or bad policy. They're just, they're just making decisions that they're going to affect us, but we're not getting involved. That we have to get involved. You've gotten involved. You're involved with with your local board. You're obviously doing everything that you just mentioned. But it seems to be a huge issue, pretty much for all small business people, because we do not get involved enough. How do we?
Correct.
Why should we? And
so regardless of the business you are in, you have to become a master at it. And what we talked about in the beginning, when you liked my professional athlete reference. Most professional athletes, they're good at every sport, but they're great at one. They're phenomenal at one. And when I got pulled back into our family landscape company in 2020, and now I have a bi-weekly meeting with my brother and the people that run the company, and we spend an hour or two together, I told my brother, get involved in everything. Get involved in the associations. Get involved in the nursery for this, the hardscape for that. They do backyards. They do kitchens, outdoor kitchens, pools. I said, get involved in all of it because you have to master your industry to truly dominate it. You're not going to just peripherally be involved and dominate. And if you want to be successful and you want to be wealthy, you have to truly dominate and learn every angle of every part of your industry. So one of the things that I did, and that's how you and I met, is I got involved with real estate conferences that were teaching how to grow your business, leads, etc. But I also got involved with the Realtor Association. Very few people got involved with both. I got involved with both. I have grown our business an immense amount from my involvement in the Realtor Association. I've been a part of decisions. I've had, even if I disagree with the decision, at least I was there when it was made, so I knew about it coming down the line. If you want to dominate your business and be a captain of your industry, you have to go in depth, in full, and learn it all. And then in time, when you get involved in other things, you don't necessarily have to be a master in those. But whatever your core competency is, you have to master it. My friend, Sean Panosian, #1 mortgage broker in the country, in America. I tell him, brand yourself as America's #1 mortgage broker. He's going to do over $1 billion this year. One mortgage broker with a team. He's right down the hall from me. This guy knows every single mortgage guideline there is to know in his head. When I did short sales years ago, people were upside down on their homes. I did thousands of them. I knew every short sale guideline with every mortgage in my head. When I get involved in the landscape company and I convinced my dad to let my brother run the show, I said, Dad, he's not 5 years old anymore. I told my brother, you better not just learn this thing. You better master this thing, every angle. And that comes from obsessive work and obsessive effort. But when you do that, you get better than everybody. You get better than your competition. And that's what you have to do to truly dominate an industry. And I have not dominated their industry yet, but I plan to, and that's what I want to do.
It's fun watching you do it, man. It's really, really fun. Anthony Lamacchia, follow this guy on Instagram, find him on YouTube, and just awesome. Always dropping nuggets for the business community. And We love having you on today. Great discussion. We'll have to reach back out to you in the future, and I'll look forward to seeing you real soon, my friend. It's a true pleasure, and congratulations on everything that you're doing. And thank you for fighting the good fight. So we'll see you real soon, my man. And guys, this is Masters of Business. Remember, you only have to do one thing: subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.